Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to our episode talking about conscious thought is source. So, today we're talking about conscious thought is source. And let me just introduce this subject. Welcome, Betty. How are you today?
I'm fine.
Excellent. So, one of the things you want to look at is when the question comes to you, what shall I do? You want to let soul as science yourself identify principle as the reason or law, the objective of all that exists or seems to exist, and the answer will come.
Yep.
When you understand that principle is the reason for every concept of life, capital L, and that without principle, there would be no concept of life, you will sense that fact in every incident of your daily life.
Yep.
You will find that every concept, animated or inanimate, invariably does its stuff for you in accordance with harmonizing rhythmic law.
I love that phrase. It's not a wreck, it's harmonizing, it's rhythmic, and it is the law.
Right. So we're going to dance about that subject and harmonize a little bit today during this conversation. So, just to give you some background, we are sponsored by the Institute of Metaphysical Science. You can join these episodes. You can go out to our site at scientificmetaphysics.org. You can see what other things are out there and what materials are out there. So please avail yourself of that as well. We're a nonprofit organization. So Betty and I do these to keep the conversation going and keep the thinking on track. So Betty, welcome. Anything you want to add to what I have said so far?
Yeah, it's really become a big item to me to really be exploring conscious thought, because we're always a thinking presence. That's what man is, the action of mind. So that thinking presence is something you want to pay attention to, because that's constituting your being. And if I think I'm up or down or in or out, happy, sad, rich, poor, all the rest of it, it is all sourced or seated in the conscious thought constituting the being that's present, calling itself you.
Mm-hmm.
Did that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, is it the same thing as where I focus my thinking, or is it beyond thinking?
Conscious thought is what's present and you try to direct it. But the conscious thought is what shapes who you are all the time.
Well, then what limits, when people say you have limiting beliefs or things are limiting, what limits that conscious thought or that expression or what it is that you see that
Oh,
evolves?
I can tell you in a hurry. One of the things that limits it is no,
Mm-hmm.
not going there, not doing that, not willing.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is, I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is, I will only go if.
Mm-hmm.
Another, all of the things that make it personal instead of leaving it open and accepting and what's the word I want? It's just like you have to give up your human personal druthers and allow principle to function consciously as yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and cut out all the personal likes, dislikes, all of that stuff. It's like opening a door to fresh air.
Yeah.
You say, wee, because I've let go of that stuff for a while.
Right. So when you said we try and direct it, what do you say more about that? Is that's not necessarily what ends up working, right? Because then we're like, I tried to direct it and it didn't do what I wanted it to do.
Right. Conscious thought is constitutional.
Okay.
So you interfere with the conscious thought when you could put in your personal wishes.
Is that called outlining?
Of course.
Okay.
Outlining, defining, limiting, weeding things out, no openness, all of that. Because you've forgotten that who you are is not something, is not a thing with things you can weed out. It's like it's a total flow that being is, and you interfere with it when you say no.
Right.
Or you say, not me. Or you say, I'll only do it if, you know,
Right.
we forget that there's a whole principle functioning, constituting the being that's present. When we forget that, we interfere with the flow.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
put a stop, a stumbling block in the way. And
Yeah.
we put it, it's always in your own way because you're the only one action going
Right.
on.
Right. Okay.
You want to really be open to conscious thought is really God being. All is infinite mind. So thinking, which constitutes man, the action of mind, is always ongoing. It's infinite, it's perfect, it's inexhaustible, all of that. And you interfere with that when you get in there with, I don't like that, or I want two of those.
Right.
I'm not going to go if you don't do it my way.
Right. Well, distinguish for me conscious thought versus the thoughts I have.
The thoughts that you think you have, you know, you don't have thoughts. Man is not a thinker. What? You
It's
can't
that
hear me?
stuff. No, I can hear you. It's this stuff. It's the ni 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 ni. The stuff
Oh,
that I say thank you for sharing about. Those are like thoughts. And then
no,
there's the whole thing about positive thinking. So I want to get rid of those thoughts and only focus on the positive stuff and like that. So I want to say distinguish those thoughts from conscious thought.
this is human thinking. Rattles
Yeah, it's
around.
always going on. Ni, ni, ni,
Conscious
ni.
thought is what has you be present. Without, in other words, I couldn't be sitting here talking with you if conscious thought were not present.
Right? Because that's
So what I,
constitutional.
so what I believe thinking is has nothing to do with thinking. Man is not a thinker. He thinks he is, but he's not.
Right. Okay.
Divine being, intelligence functioning, for instance, the God idea of mind functioning
Yeah.
constitutes all there is here.
Yeah.
And I interfere with that when I think Betty's got to get in there and arrange it all and take care of it.
Right.
Weed it out, do this, but not that.
Okay.
Yeah. Conscious thought is constitutional. It's not something I play with.
Right. So one of the things that came up for me when you were talking was conscious thought is present always. And when I'm present in the moment, this gets very quiet.
Yep.
And when this gets quiet, when the thinking that I think is thinking gets just quiet,
Yep.
now I'm present in a way that I'm open.
Yeah.
I'm
And
alert.
it's not something, what the thing you're describing right now is not an effective tool. You can't make yourself consciously think. What
Right.
you can do is shut yourself up and willing to listen to the consciousness present.
Right. But
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid and I did transcendental meditation, right? So TM, and I know that in sitting for 20 minutes and saying my mantra for example, things just quieted down.
You know why?
Things got very clear, and then I would kind of come out of that and I would be like so refreshed and alert and aware of things that I wasn't aware of potentially when I started my meditation 20 minutes earlier.
Yep. We forget all of the uh, saber rattling we do as human beings, trying to get our own attention to do whatever needs to be done.
Right.
And if you can be quiet, if you can let the internal dialogue just die down so that you're just present, the thinking that occurs is not something generated out of your effort.
Right.
It's something that's present that you can now hear because you quieted down the noise.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's effortless. It's
Right.
present.
It's always present.
And it's the other thing I wanted to say about it is it's empowering.
Of course it is.
As opposed to this, which is like nee, 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 nee. And you just want to tell it to shut up.
Well, if you're smart enough, you'd want to.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, you can't shut it up by trying to shut it up.
Right. Because that's just more of the same.
What has it, what's the word I want? What has it?
Persist?
No.
Oh.
Diminish. What has it diminish or get lost is your willingness to just listen.
And thank it for sharing and go right on.
Yeah. And be willing to be present. And if all that stuff comes up, you just say, thank you for sharing. And you just be quiet.
Okay.
Because as you get, and I don't mean that you can't make any noise when I say be quiet. What that means is give up the effort to make yourself think something.
Yeah.
To forget about trying to persuade yourself that this is the right way to go, or that's the right way to go, or too bad you did that. Oh my, you're doomed. All of that kind of stuff. Right. Just let it go. Let it be there. That's what you say, thank you for sharing, and you just let it be.
Yeah.
Because when you really let go of the noise, just let it be. And when it's quiet, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
How focused you feel, how tuned in you are to exactly what's needed this moment and this moment and this moment and this moment.
It's like you give permission for your intuition to come into full bloom.
Yeah, and you're removing the stumbling blocks so that the intuition that's always in full bloom shows up.
Yeah, I get it. All right, we've got a comment. Look at that, Lydia. This is great stuff.
You bet.
Right.
I'm delighted that you found that out, Lydia.
Yeah. So anyway, so fun. All right. So in the identification of principle with the concept, principle becomes the life of the concept and the law governing it. The concept cannot fail in itself. It can only seem to fail when identified as if it had existence in itself.
Yep.
Do you want to say anything more about that? Is that clear?
Clear to me.
As clear as mud. If anyone else has a comment or a question, feel free to type it into your comment box. We will get them and we love them. We'll bring them in if we're live. We'll bring them in and we'll discuss them. So feel free to just say what's there and any questions that you might have, because that's all fun stuff. Now, when you identify principle with whatever you may seem to be experiencing, principle forms a new concept for its identity. So is that the disappearing, reappearing in fairer form each minute, each moment, each second, each instant? Is that what we're talking about there?
That's what's going on all the time, whether you know it or not.
Right. Yeah. But when it says that when you identify principle with whatever you may seem to be experiencing, principle forms a new concept for its identity. In other words, it doesn't get stuck.
It's like confronting your everyday living with the law. Nothing is by accident. We talked about accidents a couple of times ago or something.
Last
Nothing
week.
is, yeah. Okay. But principle is always present, whole, perfect, inexhaustible, available, accountable. It's always present, functioning perfectly. That functioning of principle constitutes man. So it isn't something I impose on something I'm trying to do. It's like backing off from Betty's great ideas and saying it's already there, present, functioning perfectly. Get out of the way and let it go.
Yeah.
Because it is the constitutional thing that will take care of whatever your human picture presents.
Yeah. Yeah. The concepts. Oh, go ahead.
I want to say about that is that the thing that this whole discussion brings up is looking at the thing called conscious thought, because that's constitutional. There is a infinite mind, if I can go there, functioning, and that shows up right now calling itself Betty. Okay, so I can either respond like the Betty, the white-haired lady that thinks she knows something to say, or I can say, whatever comes up has value, so I pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what shuts Betty up. Really and truly, 24/7, there's this Betty. But 24/7, there's also conscious thought.
Mm-hmm.
Without conscious thought, there wouldn't even be a Betty. But what does conscious thought have to do with Betty? Well, conscious thought is, it's like the pillar of support that has existence present.
Mm-hmm.
And Betty is like the noise that doesn't look at the support system once in a while. But that's why a problem comes up. It says, Betty, pay attention.
Yeah.
And then I say, okay. So I begin to, again, go back and say, wait a minute. Conscious thought constitutes. So all is in line right now, on even keel, doing exactly what it should be doing. And Betty gets quiet. She can appreciate what's functioning.
Yeah.
And as long as Betty's running around being Betty, she misses the message. The value is always present, not always recognized, not always acknowledged. So when a problem occurs, one of the things that we've learned to do in working with science is to consciously acknowledge what is the spiritual fact present. The definition Mrs. Eddy gave, we've got it in this paper somewhere, but anyway.
That's in there.
Yeah, the definition of science with which can be discerned the spiritual fact of whatever the senses behold, whatever confronts you. So it's always present. And it's kind of like a homework assignment to Betty to say, thank you for sharing and listen. Because the value is there, the answer is there, the well-being is always present,
mm-hmm.
the generosity, the fulfillment.
Yeah.
It isn't something that Betty generates. It's something that Betty becomes present to.
Right.
When she's quiet enough to let it happen.
Right.
To recognize that it is the happening. It's hard to say some of this stuff, but anyway, get the idea.
Yeah. Well, we're using I Am My Own Ancestor written by Margaret Laird, a paper written by Margaret Laird, available from the IMS or scientificmetaphysics.org. You can get a copy of it. That's what we're referencing tonight. The concepts of life you sense or think into being are determined by your understanding of life. And that comes from page 30 to 31 in I Am My Own Ancestor. So if we dive in on page 28, Margaret Laird wrote, "Your conscious thought is an operational definition of yourself and your understanding, which determines your thinking."
Yeah. Wonderful statement. See, you don't think something. You are the presence of thinking. And what determines that thinking? We just read it.
Right.
Conscious thought, the operational definition of yourself.
And then she goes on. Yep, she goes on to say it determines whether emotional reactions will be negative or positive.
That's right. Good, bad, or indifferent. Yep.
All right. And then Mary Baker Eddy on page 585, line 10 in Science and Health wrote, defining the function of science. And this is what you're referring to a little bit ago. Yep. Science with which can be discerned the spiritual fact of whatever the material senses behold.
Exactly.
And on Mind as the Athlete on page 14, your book, you wrote, what is the source or generative cause of the human condition?
Yep.
And that would be conscious thought.
Yep.
Can I say the same? Could I say being?
Well, being is mind functioning.
Right. But could that be another synonym for conscious thought?
Well, being is all there is, so it's not a synonym, it's constitutional.
Right. Well, so is conscious thought.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if I could interchange them.
I don't know.
Okay, I stumped her. All right. And then more discussion. Cause or source must be immeasurably great, inexhaustible, perfect, and timeless in its scope and power.
Yeah, and that's where we come back to conscious thought. You see, that is the source.
Yes.
And conscious thought is not something you do. It's something you are.
Yeah.
We think we're an object and we're not.
No, we're a verb.
We're an action of the God idea. Yeah. We're the action of mind functioning.
Yes.
It's called thinking. So thinking is man. It isn't something man does. It's something man is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then on page 28 of I Am My Own Ancestor, Margaret Laird also wrote, what is happening in the world is that individuality is being freed through science from the limitations of personal sense. And this means freedom from suffering, want, and woe. Yep.
But you got to remember now, this is through science. You will live the suffering, want, and woe routine of human experience if you think that what you're observing in your language world, the world of your own being, we are the world we walk through. Mm-hmm. If you're observing that as if it were existent outside of your mind.
And outside of mind, not outside of your mind.
It's the only mind there is, so it's your mind. And Margaret makes that point quite a few times in some of her seminars. She said, it is your mind. It's the only mind you've got. It's the only mind there is.
Yes.
And it's not personal. It's not Betty's mind. It's my mind. Mm-hmm. And there's a distinction there. But if you think there's something else doing it for you, you're off the beaten path. I mean,
right.
There is nothing outside of the being you and the world you walk through.
Right.
There's one mind functioning perfectly all the time. We live it as we see it.
Right.
Conscious thought makes the difference.
Right.
So if I'm going to appreciate the conscious thought present, calling itself Betty, I have to quiet the Betty down and be ready to listen to the thing that has me be.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I call it Betty or something else, it won't matter.
Right.
But there's one thing going on, and it is conscious thought.
Right. In Science and Health, Mary Baker Eddy on page 574, starting on line 27, wrote, "The very circumstance which your suffering sense deems wrathful and afflictive, love can make an angel entertained unawares."
That's right. That's right. There's no impossible problem. There's no tragedy, no happening in the human picture of things, no circumstance that stands against the fact of being.
Yeah.
But you can only live that fact when your conscious thought includes it.
Yeah.
It's always present, but unless I acknowledge it for myself, I'm not living in terms of what's present. I'm living like Betty, figuring it all out.
Yeah.
So when I really get pushed to the wall, I just stop and really appreciate that I may call it Betty.
Right.
Infinite mind functioning is a thing that has this picture called Betty occur.
Right.
All is well, and Betty can just go sit in the chair and let it all work out.
Right.
And when I say Betty sits in the chair, I don't mean that I won't be active, because I will. I just won't be letting Betty run the show.
Right.
But I'm clear that who I am as being is the show.
Right.
Yep.
Melinda Swenson wrote, asked the question, does my experience reflect my understanding or conscious thought? Maybe both.
Who is this?
Melinda Swenson.
Pardon?
Melinda Swenson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
See it right in front of us. Does my experience reflect my understanding or conscious thought, or maybe both?
Well, absolutely. And it is the experience calling itself Melinda. Yes.
Okay. Good.
I don't see those little, when somebody speaks up, I'm glad you call my attention to it, because I don't see it. Yeah.
Okay. So then moving on, what you say in Mind is the Athlete on page 111. That's not right. I think I forgot that page to swap it out. Your perception or belief that the physical universe is all that exists limits you in every dimension of your life.
Yeah, and that's on page 14.
Okay.
And I wrote a note there too. What we observe, talking about our language stuff, all the stuff around us.
Yeah.
The way I see my world is my language. Okay, so what we observe, or our language world, you see, is our individual best view of reality. That's the only thing it can be a view of, because nothing else is real. Nothing else is present. It's a figment of the imagination, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, great participation, y'all. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. All right. And I Am My Own Ancestor on page 29, Margaret Laird wrote, the Christ or Savior principle is never absent. Hence, suffering will continue as long as it has value for the realization that man does not live personally, but individually.
Mm-hmm.
Now, distinguish for me personally and individually.
Oh, well, your individuality is your being. Personally is Betty.
Okay, so individually, you're speaking of being. Personally, you're thinking of personality or Betty or Kim.
I'm thinking of the language view.
Okay, all right. Okay, good.
Be personal.
Yeah, cool. And as more discussion on that, as long as you justify and rationalize your personality, you are not master of your world. When you spiritually evaluate criticism as uncovering personality characteristics you did not know you had, to the end that they may be self-seen and disappear, then your individuality, comes to view as the master of all you survey.
Yeah, and that word then, I bolded it and underlined it so you would emphasize it, which you didn't.
Where is, I don't see it bolded and underlined.
Criticism as uncovering personality characteristics you didn't know you had, to the end that they may be self-seen and disappear. Then your individuality comes to view as the master of what you survey.
Okay. Yes.
So you've got a little job to do with your personal sense of yourself in order to see clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. I see what happened with how I copied that over. All right. And then Science and Health on page 578, line 5. Mary Baker Eddy wrote, yeah.
She's doing a takeoff on the 23rd Psalm.
Okay. Doing a takeoff on the 23rd Psalm. Divine love is my shepherd, I shall not want. Love maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Love leadeth me beside the still waters. Love restoreth my soul. Spiritual sense.
Yeah. Important to know that. You know, you may think that whatever it is you do when something occurs makes the difference. It's always divine love that meets the need. It's never the thing you do.
Right.
Never.
It's the being itself being that has whatever's needed show up.
Yeah, I think Betty rushes around and does what she thinks she needs to do, but that doesn't make the answer. It's divine love present and acknowledged. And then I can run around and fix dinner if I want to. But fixing dinner isn't going to satisfy my hunger. What satisfies my hunger is divine love present, taking care of the whole thing.
Right. Got it.
Yeah, constituting my being.
Yeah.
Betty doesn't do it, but she tries.
Right. Right. Don't we?
Yeah.
And then in Mind is the Athlete on page 14, you wrote, an informed acknowledgement of your own pre-existence is awesome power, since it is liberation from the limitations inherent within your physical universe.
Yep.
Yep. And is there anything more you want to say about conscious thought as source?
I want to pay attention to that word, informed acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't rattle off words and think it's going to make any difference.
Right.
It's living the idea, consciously aware. When you really can live that idea, you're on your way.
And that's just understanding.
That's right. And understanding in every situation is the answer.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's all we have today for our exploration. Thank you all for being here. We will be here again next week at 5 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Central. Set your calendars. If you're on Facebook, go out to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our channel so you get notifications and all of that, and share this with whoever you think would add value to. Let's expand the listening that's out there. Imagine if everybody was coming from this kind of way of thinking and being and all of that, what that might look like in our own experience of living.
Yep.
All right. So anyways, thank you so much. We shall see you next week. Same time, same bat channel. Go forth and pay attention to your thinking. Okay. Adios.